Session. If you're watching us live, good to have you here. If you're watching on the pre-record, likewise, good to have you here. Welcome to what we're going to be doing. This is Difficult Conversations 2. I was going to call this Emotional Damage, which if you were watching TikTok when it first broke through to sort of the UK consciousness maybe 5 years ago, it was a bit of a thing. It was a guy shouting emotional damage. And it was sort of popped up all over the place when people embarrassed themselves or fell over or whatever. And I thought it's a bit of a weird one, so perhaps we won't relate it to this session. Now, if you already saw Difficult Conversations 1, naturally, this follows. This is because at Blue Beetle, difficult conversations over all the time we've been working, and we've been working in the leadership space now for more than 30 years. One of the things that of course, keeps coming back is how do you have the conversations that you have to have with colleagues when things don't work as well as they should? And the cold, hard reality is difficult conversations are difficult because of everything they involve. They involve disappointment and upset, and sometimes a bit of fibbing. They sometimes involve a bit of maybe not being quite honest about what you should or shouldn't have done. They involve frequently some upset or some anger, some emotional response, which is what we are talking about in this live today. Now, this live is going to be like previous ones, 10, 12, maybe 15 minutes. We'll see how we go. If you are watching this live, feel free to jump in, ask questions, comments, observations. Very happy to deal with those. But if you do want to know more about what we do, how we do it, you can, of course, find us on LinkedIn. You can find us on YouTube, on Facebook. You can find us on TikTok. We are broadcasting to 3 channels at the moment. But let's get into this topic. So of everything we teach, difficult conversations, sometimes called courageous conversations, but ultimately just conversations you have to have when you're a supervisor, when you're a manager, when you're a leader. One of the points I made in part 1 of this program was that people will often put off difficult conversations, and they will put them off in the hope that somehow they will resolve. Somehow, magically, the person will realize what they shouldn't have done, and they'll stop doing it. They'll stop being late. They'll start being on time. And unfortunately, that rarely happens. Pretty much, typically, most of the time, people will do what they're going to do, difficult though it is. And so our problem as managers, as supervisors, is that we have to somehow manage and deal with these conversations. So how do we do this? Now, assuming you're having a private conversation in an office space or away from some of your colleagues, if I ask delegates to think, what are the emotional reactions you're most concerned of? It's usually one of these. If you have different ones, feel free to drop them in the comments. Anger often comes like that, anger and threats. Threats, of course, could be I know where you live, or threats can be things like I'm going to go over your head. I'm going to go, I know the boss. I'm going to go to HR, put a complaint against you. So anger, threats. We'll often see people getting very upset. So crying is a big worry for people. I do have a question for you in a moment about crying. And also we get concerned about the slightly different version. So when people get sarcastic or a bit sulky. And so I will often say to delegates when they're working with Blue Beetle and we're talking about difficult conversations, what are the emotional responses you most dislike having to deal with? And that list I just gave you, that's the list. That's the one that always comes up. So let's go through them. Let's go through them step by step, because ultimately the fact that you might get that reaction doesn't mean that you get to put the conversation off. You might choose to delay it. You might choose to try and ask somebody to help you. But ultimately, if you're the supervisor, if you're the manager, you need to understand the conversation still needs to happen. And a quick advertising break. If you're looking at some provision for your clients, for your teams, for your colleagues, if you need some help with your supervisors, your next first line, the people who are coming through, you want to know how we can do this, then let me know, drop me a DM, drop me a comment. I'll be delighted to talk to how we can help you in your situation. So anger is an interesting one. And one of the points that I often say to delegates is how you react, how you feel about the thing that you're hearing that you might not like is fine. And what I mean by it's fine I mean, quite literally, you can feel upset, you can feel angry, you can feel that people are being sarcastic. You really can respond in any way you like internally. So, one of the difficulties we need to separate is how people feel versus how they act. And that list I gave you, anger, threats, crying, sulking, sarcasm, with the possible exception of crying, but even that, I'll come back to in a minute, with the possible exception of that, these are choices that you are making. And it's important that we understand that. And when I say it's important we understand that, I mean this. The fact that I say something you don't like, I might still have to say it. If I'm your supervisor, if I'm your manager, I still need to tell you this thing. So if you're watching this from the perspective of, should we get somebody in to help our first line managers, this is one of the greatest difficulties they have. Why should they face unpleasantness, upset, emotional response if they don't really know why they have to deal with it? It doesn't feel fair. So one of the first things we're going to do is separate how you feel versus how you behave. And my argument is going to be this. Unless you are a teenager or a toddler, and my belief is you're probably not working with teenagers or toddlers, you're probably working with other grown-ups. Might sometimes wonder, but pretty much, yeah, you're working with other grown-ups. The reality is everybody has an expectation of a reasonable, fair, decent place to work. It is reasonable and fair that if you and I are working together today, then we ought to expect at least the base level of respect between us. Respect between us doesn't mean that we like each other, that we agree with each other, that everything's going to be super duper and we're going for a drink later on. It doesn't mean that. But it means that I ought to be able to say something that you don't like. You're absolutely free to go, hey, internally, but externally, I expect a level of professionalism back, and vice versa. Now, this first point is key to understand, because often as supervisors, as managers, as leaders, we're trying to keep everything happy. We're trying to make sure everyone's fine. And the harsh reality is that everyone's not. Frequently, people are not chuffed with what's going on. People are going to grumble and moan. That, unfortunately, is the burden of leadership. But let's come back to this anger thing. So there's two well-known philosophies about dealing with somebody who's ranting and raving at you. I think they're both fine. I think they both have something to recommend them, and I have my preference. Here's the first version. The first version is this. People say that if somebody's so angry that they want to rant and shout, you should let them. People say that if they are shouting, they're letting it all out. And people say that if they let it all out, then they can calm down and then they can talk. Now, many people support that as an argument. And I think in truth, if that's what you believe is going to work for you, then you should do that. My personal belief is I don't go to work to get shouted at. My personal belief is I kind of don't care how angry we both are. I don't think either of us get the right to shout at each other. So personally, if that works for you, brill. But I prefer the second solution. And the second solution for me is this. It comes back to what I've just been articulating for you. If you are angry and you want to shout, you're going to do that somewhere else because I'm not going to be shouted at. Now, we sometimes get into splitting semantics here. We get into what if there's a difference between shouting just because you're angry versus shouting at someone? Is swearing automatically a hard line? If they go, oh, hey, but they're just doing that generally to the universe versus you, oh, is that different? You know, I don't think we need a hard and fast rule. For me, if I'm being shouted at, if I'm feeling threatened, if I'm feeling that you're aiming your anger at me, I'm maybe less comfortable with that. But I think either of those work well. If you want to let people shout, cool. If you think that lets them calm down. If you want to say, no, that's a hard line. Sorry, we're not doing that. You leave, or you leave. Either I'm walking out the room or, goodbye. It's entirely up to you. I think one of the difficulties if you are going to leave, frequently I will see people go, that's it, hard line. And they go, oh, I'm sorry. You go, okay, fine. And they start shouting again. This is much like handling a toddler in a supermarket. If it's no, it's no. And the problem is, if you don't do this, what you will do is you'll be giving tacit approval for them to keep behaving like that. Now, to me, it's incredible that people at work feel that's acceptable. But I know that some people at work do feel that's acceptable. So for me, that's the balance you take. I think in either case, it is worth remembering. When somebody is angry and shouting, that switch in the brain has been flicked and they aren't listening. They're not reasoning. That part of their brain currently is shut off by the more, shall I say, basic part, just at the top of the spine here, base of the skull. And that's all about, shall I run away from it or shall I fight it? Shall I eat it or shall I mate with it? That's it. That's the part of the brain you're dealing with. So for you to get your spreadsheet out and go, well, yeah, let's look at your KPIs, you are wasting your time. There is no point reasoning at this stage. But for me, the guiding principle, if we are in a difficult conversation and somebody is, quote, being angry, we need to decide if we're happy with that at work. If you are, fill your boots. Personally, I'm not. It's not what I would expect. It's not what I'd accept. So that's anger. Let's think about threats. I think threats is pretty much a no. If it's a credible one, I'm gonna feed that up. I'm gonna feed that out. I'm gonna tell everybody I need to tell, and I'm gonna leave the room as soon as possible. The interesting challenge to this, however, is if somebody says, I'm not happy, I'm going to HR. Now, at this point, and I've got to assume you've been fair and reasonable and transparent and proportionate at this point, then that's not as bad as it sounds. It won't feel comfortable, but interestingly, whenever we run a difficult conversations program anywhere, we tend to find that there's usually a spike in grievances and complaints and grumbles at HR. Now, in a weird way, that's quite a positive thing because it means that managers are starting to manage. It means that supervisors are starting to say, no, that's the line. It won't feel like it at the time, but if the only threat you get from a colleague in a difficult conversation is, I'm going to talk to HR, assuming you've been fair, reasonable, proportionate, that's good. They should be encouraged to go and talk to HR. A lot of people who say they're going to do that, they aren't going to go and do that. But if they do, and you're covered, we're all fine. Now let's talk about sulking and sarcasm. These two are often bundled together. They sound like two sides of the thing, don't they? If somebody doesn't get angry, they maybe get a bit sarcastic or they maybe start throwing a few comments in there. How do we deal with sulking and sarcasm? Now, whenever I ask a room full of delegates, how do you deal with sarcasm? There's usually a little moment where people kind of, well, I give them both barrels back. There's a thing, isn't there? None of us want to be wrong. And it's really unfair if you've been fair, if you've been reasonable, if you've done what you should have done, and then somebody's being sarcastic to you, it can hurt. Of course it can. But you know, I know, the people I'm talking with on a difficult conversations program, we all know being sarcastic back is probably one of the worst things you can do. If you're going to be sarcastic back, you're just going to feed it. So what do we do? Well, again, I think there's two main versions of what you could do here. The first is what I would call the HR method, and I've seen lots of HR people do this. It's quite a devastatingly powerful process, and it always makes me giggle because if you do this and you're talking to somebody who's reasonably switched on, they're going to get very quickly what's going on. So you say to somebody, right, how do we solve this? And they go, I don't know, Graham. I work 24 hours a day, shall I? They're probably being sarcastic. So I'm seeing a lot of HR professionals, and you have to walk a fine line to get this right. A lot of HR professionals say, Bob, I'm not sure if you're aware, but when you said that, you sounded like you were being sarcastic, and I'm sure that wasn't the case. So what's actually our suggestion? Now, if you do that, again, it can sound a little bit passive aggressive, so you have to be very careful when you deliver it. But what I love about that approach is it gives somebody the opportunity to either go, I'm at work, my boss has asked me something, I've been sarcastic back, probably not a smart move. And if they are sensible, they'll go, sorry, I'm a bit wound up. Okay, we'll talk about it. That's what a sensible person will do. But not so switched on people will double down. Well, I just think blah, 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 and away they go. But you've given them the opportunity. It gives you the responsibility to stay safe, confident, in a transparent position. It gives them the opportunity to fix what they just did. And if they take it, great. And if they don't, well, that's kind of on them, isn't it? So I like that version. My personal favorite, I guess, is a bit like that, but it's a bit like it's a bit like this idea of just pretending I haven't noticed. So it's being slightly wide-eyed and innocent. So somebody says to me, how are we going to fix this? Oh, I don't know, Graham. I'll do 24 hours a day, shall I? You've got to not miss a beat. 24 hours a day. Okay, what else? Now, most people at that point will go, but I can't work 24 hours a day, can I? Oh, okay, fine. So what shall we do then? In other words, it's just going to step over and kind of ignore the fact that you've just given me a really stupid, sarcastic answer. That's what you want to do? Do that. But I'm going to give you the opportunity to fix it. Again, most people in that situation, most people, not all, are going to be sensible enough to go, I kind of need to fix this. So that's generally what we have found works very, very well when it comes to sarcasm. And let's now, in this conversation about difficult conversations at work, talk a little bit about crying, because crying is the big one, isn't it? A lot of clients that I work with, supervisors, managers, get really tense about how do I deal if somebody starts to cry in a difficult conversation. And usually the answers are these. Get out of the room and get HR in. Okay. Give them a tissue. Send them off to the toilets. Now, none of these are particularly good, I'm sorry to tell you. So let's figure out a slightly better strategy right away. Now, the first thing to do, if you're having a difficult conversation with somebody, first thing to do, kind of don't notice. That sounds like a joke answer, or it sounds like you're being a bit cruel. Neither of those are true. But if you're having a conversation and you're working together and you're jotting some stuff down or you're writing in the on your device and you notice they're filling up a bit, and you can't lunge in for a hug, we know this, right? But the problem with going, oh, I can tell you're upset, is you're almost certainly going to call that wrong. I can tell you're upset. What could their response be? I'm not upset. I'm pissed off. I'm angry. I feel let down. I feel you let me down. I think the company has let me down. My partner warns me. I'm angry. And the problem we have, the moment we label it as I can see you're upset, is we can trigger all of that. The other problem we can have is that, yeah, they can be really upset, and we've now called attention to it. It's a little bit like, if you can imagine, you know, when you're watching a film at home and it's a bit of a, you don't know why, but you find yourself filling up. You find yourself about to cry. It's maybe a bit of a weepy, and it can be a bit embarrassing. So you find yourself filling up, and you go, I'm going to go make a cup of tea, because you don't want your partner noticing. And that's embarrassing enough. Thank you for that thumbs up there. That's embarrassing enough at home. But imagine that at work. Your boss suddenly says, oh, I can see you're upset. There's nothing nice or comfortable about that. And so we're actually better, and I talk to clients all the time about this in our Difficult Conversations program. We're better to almost not notice. So you might fill up a little bit, carry on working, we carry on talking. Now that gives you an option. This is stage one of three. This gives you an option as the person who fills up. You might get a little bit upset, realize it's happening, glance at me, think I haven't noticed, gives you the chance just to do that and get yourself back into it. Now that's good. That's fairer to you. It's a lot more allowed. Look, we all get upset, right? We can all cry. We can all get angry. We can all these things. But this is just a little bit of leeway. Gives you the chance just to get yourself back on track. Now that might work. And for some people, that's enough. The second stage is, it's obvious you're crying. Now at this point, the best thing you can do as a supervisor or manager is just slow it down a bit. Just stop the work for a moment. And they will either go, oh, I'm sorry, just give me a minute. or they will keep crying. What we have found works very, very well. We've got 30 years of people feeding back going, oh my God, it worked. Yes, that's what we told you. But one of the best things you can do at this second stage is to go, I'm going to get you a glass of water. Now, if they've got one of those big things of water in front of them that lots of people have got these days, go and get them a cup of tea. But you're going to excuse yourself, thank you again, to go and get a drink for them. Do not send them out of the room. If you send them out of the room, there's a high probability, one, they may not come back, and two, you now lose control over this. Because if you're having a private conversation, they step outside your room, somebody outside your office is the local drama queen. They love it when there's some crying going on. And poor soul steps out of your office crying, oh my gosh, what's he done to you now? What she said to you? Come and talk to me. And the whole thing explodes. So do them a favor, do yourself a favor, say, I'm going to get you a cup of tea. I'm going to get you a drink of water. Now, when you step out, again, this is our second stage, several points now, they have a chance to get themselves back on track. Remember, they are totally entitled to feel upset, let down, pissed off, frustrated, all the things that humans might feel. They are allowed to feel all those things. We're not saying they can't, but we know that we still have to have the conversation. And most of us don't want to cry in front of our bosses. Most of us don't want to cry in front of a colleague. So let's give them the respect to allow them just to do this themselves. If you say go to the bathroom, they might be 3 minutes, they might be 10 minutes, they might not come back till tomorrow. So let's not do that. You go out, get a drink for them. When you come back, you've got a little sneaky look around the door. If they look like they're back on it, that's fine. When you come back with a drink, this bit is important. Hold the drink out and say, take a sip. Don't put it on the table in front of them. Now, this sounds like a weird little joke, but if you put a drink out to people and say, take a sip, they will. Everybody will do as they're told. And you can't sip and cry at the same time. It's a pattern interrupt, and it just stops that little moment. Now, they can still be upset. They can still feel all those things they felt, but it gives them a chance just to get back in the game. Now, at that point, you and they, you both know they're crying, and you have that opportunity just to sort of say, look, we good to carry on, or shall we just put this back for half an hour? You can make a more informed choice. But what we have found, ignoring that initial one, stepping out, and then coming back and giving them a drink, there's 3 stages there, and most often somebody will be able to get a bit of a grip there, stop themselves blubbing, and enable to get themselves a little bit more back into the conversation. And that's really what I wanted to talk about in today's session. We've been talking about Difficult Conversations Part 2, emotional reactions. If you have enjoyed this, you'll know more about how we work. We use a lot of live case study using actors, trained actor facilitators who are very experienced at working in the office workspace. So we create live situations that delegates can watch. Don't make them do role play. We can use a lot of live tools, tips and techniques. And it means that our delegates on our leadership programs for coaching, leadership, management programs, helping people build themselves up as leaders, are able to practice in a safe and supported environment. They're not sat there just reading notes or reading stuff off a slide, but it's as real as it can be. A lot of humor, huge amounts of engagement. Everything we do is practical, and we are award winning. So if you want to know more about how we do, what we do, then do let me know. Drop into the DMs and I'll be delighted to arrange a little virtual coffee with you. We don't do sales meetings, we don't do sales calls, but we do often when we meet our potential clients, a bit like this. We have a chat over a Zoom call, over a Teams, have a cup of coffee, answer your questions and see what we can do to sort out. Anyway, lovely working with you on this session. Do please drop me a